Okay, recording in progress. So, where we're picking up, we are picking up the bottom paragraph of page 25. This is actually where we ended last week. And I caught a spirit, as I always do, reading this paragraph and talked and didn't leave David much time before we wrapped up. So I want to make sure we give David his due, because this is such an important paragraph, guys. It's so important before we roll into a couple more amazing pages. So let's give this its due. So I'm going to reread it. And then, I don't know, Sam, if you've got any words in this one that you didn't do last week, or you want to reiterate, we'll look to you first as well, as always, rather. But let's do this. Bottom of page 25. If you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. And the other, to accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort.
Okay, I'm David. I'm a recovered alcoholic and a drug addict. So yeah, David did a really good job last week, but that was a week ago. So let's revisit what we're talking about here. And what David talked about, first of all, is finding some passion in the big book, something that I can connect to, something that I can have a relationship with here. And for David, it was pages 25, the bottom paragraph here, and again on page 27. And for me, it's pages 84, where we're talking about the 10-step disciplines and also the promises of the 10-step on 84 to 85. That's just something I connected with, guys, something that made me a passion that I wanted to continue to learn more and more about this book and dive into it. So to this paragraph on page 25 in the third paragraph, if you were seriously alcoholic as we were, so the we we're talking about here is the first 100. But seriously alcoholic, well, we have done the work up to this part of the book. We've learned a little bit about the doctor's opinion and what happens when we put alcohol or any drugs in our body, that we break out in this craving, we have this abnormal reaction, this cycle in motion of an abnormal reaction, this craving that I break out in. And once I start, I cannot stop. So I understand that, and now we're starting to get into the obsession, to the mind part of the book. So we're not going to be talking about alcohol in our bodies any longer in the book. It says, but we believe there's no middle of the road solution. So I know when I first went to meetings, I got a sponsor, and he'd go to 90 meetings in 90 days and call me every day at 6:30. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not going to keep me sober. And later in this paragraph, they're going to tell me why that won't keep me sober. They also told me, just don't drink and go to meetings. Well, if I could just don't drink, I wouldn't be hanging around with you people, and you wouldn't be hanging around with me. We'd just go on our merry way. Everything would be fine and dandy. And by the way, if you tell me just don't drink and go to meetings, that's a message to my body. What about my mind? What am I going to do about that? That's the greater problem anyways. It says, and then we take this thing and we take these statements, we turn them into questions like David and I like to do. Is in the next sentence says, I'll put it, me as the first person here. David, were you in a position where life was becoming impossible? Dude, for sure, man. I'm locked up in a psych ward. I'm going to go to prison, I know, for the crimes I just committed. Probably not going to see my wife and kids for a very long time. I don't have a job. I don't have any money. The wife's going to find out about all this credit card debt. Yeah, life is absolutely so impossible. It's ridiculous. And if you pass into a region from which there is no return through human aid, what's the fellowship consist of? Human beings. A power greater than myself. Please don't get me wrong. I love the fellowship. Go to as many meetings as you can possibly go to, for sure. But David read in the opening comments here that they used to meet once a week. And I still go to 6 meetings a week. A lot of them are here on Zoom. And I'm also blessed enough to do a lot of talks. But at the same time, I'm still really connected to the fellowship. One part of my triangle, for sure, the unity part of it. But it says there's pass through no return to human aid. My kids are powerful. My wife is powerful. My career is powerful. No human aid, no human power. Because why? Because I have no power, no choice, no control. So it gives me something to consider here. We have but two alternatives. Now, I've heard a lot of times, guys, well, maybe, if I got that right girl, maybe that right career, just enough money. So I'm looking for Another alternative? Are you freaking kidding me here? Let's look at the content of the book. The context of the book says we have but two alternatives. One I'm very, very familiar with, by the way, is to go on the bitter end, blotting out the conscience of my intolerable situation. That one I know like the back of my hand. The one I don't know anything about here, it says, and the other one is success spiritual help. Well, what, for Christ's sake, are you talking about? This religious program of Alcoholics Anonymous? Well, you call it what you want to call it, but the whole darn program is spiritual in nature. And Bill does a lot of darn good work to make sure it's not very religious. It's not going to offend Catholics or Jews or Muslims or Protestants or Baptists or anything like that. It's not bringing any of that stuff in here. Spiritual help means a set of disciplines. Oh, well, I'm not a very disciplined person now that I come and think about it. I just kind of do what I want whenever I want. And because I'm driven by alcohol and drugs, I really have no power, no choice, no control. So spiritual help, maybe that sounds kind of yummy, actually. And by the way, my bottom looks like this, and it is a feeling. It wasn't the consequences of the circumstances of being in the psych ward and going to get locked up very soon after this because I'm going to end up in the courtroom. It was a feeling. The feeling was, this is my life, and it's never going to get any better than this. And I had that moment in a psych ward. I had that moment. That to me is a moment of clarity where God froze a liar in me just long enough to see the truth. And I took an action beyond anything I've ever done in my entire life. I went to a payphone in that psych ward and I called a guy in Alcoholics Anonymous and asked him for help. And we talked for 15, 20 minutes, I believe. I can't remember now. And at the end of the conversation, he said to me, he goes, David, you're my brother and I love you. I will help you if you let me. Think about it, guys. I can't help you if you don't let me. And I need to want my sobriety more than he wants my sobriety too. So I'll take the spiritual help all day long. And David brings this up when he does this talk. It seems like a no-brainer right now. Are you kidding me? And I want more spiritual help. So this is not where it just stops. It doesn't stop right here. Spiritual help means for my entire life. The way this way of living is the way Bill words it in the book. This way of living is all through spiritual help.
So I'm just going to run it back one more time. I talked about this last week, and David called back to it again. If you're just getting into the book, like really getting into it, find the passage, the page, the sentence, the paragraph that really speaks to you. I said it last week. I'll just repeat it again. For me, it was this paragraph. I so identified with this. I felt like I was at the crossroads where at this point in my life, I was just going to keep on going. I knew I was killing myself. Or I could do this other infinitely scarier thing and ask for and accept spiritual help. Because I so identified with it, I just felt like there's got to be more content in this book that was written for me. And what I learned with enough study and enough reps is it's all written for me. Right? This is the story of my life, past, present, and future. But it was written 40 some odd years before I was born. If you're a real alcoholic, real addict like me, I suspect you've had the same experience with this book. And if you haven't, my goodness, give yourself the opportunity to have this great experience with the book. Don't try to read it alone if you haven't done it before. I hear some people do that. They pick up the book and it's very meaningful. And I'm always shocked because I try to say this modestly. I'm a pretty sharp guy. I come from a family of very smart people. I came out of the womb with a book in my hand. Reading was a very big part of my upbringing. We're all voracious readers. I took honors courses in university with Shakespeare, right? Everybody remember how difficult it was to read Shakespeare? I loved it. I devoured it. I couldn't read this book. I had a little mental blank spot about being able to identify with this content until I started listening to some people who understood it and could walk me through it. People in person in real life, and then some of my earliest tape mentors like Joe and Charlie. I mean, those guys helped revolutionize my experience with the book, and God bless those two guys. And then so many other amazing speakers too, but those two guys are really the gold standard for making it so simple for me to understand. Okay, so I think we're going to move on. Top of 26 now. Oh, okay. So we're going to start another story here about another doctor. I'm going to give just a little bit of background because I probably won't do it justice. I'll start going, sideways in a million different directions. So In this story, we're going to be talking about a gentleman named Roland Hazard. He's unnamed in the book. He's just described as a certain American businessman, but his name is Roland Hazard, and he's going to be getting help from a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, a guy named Carl Jung. Now, I assume most of you have been around a little bit and are probably familiar with the story, but for the benefit of perhaps anyone who's not familiar, just going to give the sort of nickel explanation. If you haven't heard of Carl Jung, and I got a lot of nice old contemporaries like me and David here, so you guys probably are familiar with them from school. He was a very famous Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. He was a disciple and student for a while of Sigmund Freud. If you haven't heard of Jung, Carl Jung, you probably heard of Sigmund Freud. Freud is typically recognized as kind of the godfather of modern psychoanalysis and psychiatry. I think, not up with psychiatry today, but historically, from an educational perspective, Freud very much considered, one of the greatest psychiatric minds of all time. If you went back in the day to go get help from Freud, right, he's going to take care of you. He's going to get you better through a lot of talk therapy, that traditional, we look at laying on the couch. What's your problem, David? Oh, is it, tell me about your relationship with your mother and your Oedipal complex and all these things. This is okay. There's lots of value in all this very important kind of talk therapy. So he would help people with that and maybe some pharmacology. And he had many disciples, many students, but two of them were very prominent. One was a guy named Adler, who very much took with Freud that he thought everything could be resolved through working on the mind, right? Jung, after a while, even though he was a disciple of Freud's, parted ways with him. Jung, as a result of much learning, and in particular, and not educated enough to go into the whole story about it, maybe in a future one, but he spent some time, he had a very pivotal event, a conference that happened at Clark College, where he had culminated with some experiences with William James. And William James is the author of Varieties of Religious Experience. And James imparted to Jung a lot of these ideas about spirituality and getting healthier through a spiritual solution. So I set all this up just to give a little context. Remember, this story that we're going to share here is pre-12-step recovery, pre-AA. This is earlier than, say, I can't tell you the exact year. I ought to be able to quote it. Maybe David has, or maybe Howard will have it for us at the end of the meeting. But prior to 12-step recovery, okay, where Roland is desperately alcoholic and seeking help from, keep this in mind, one of the most brilliant psychiatrists on the planet at the time. It's amazing that he was able to have an audience with this doctor, right? And this doctor is going to share with him his experience, and he's going to try to help him to the best of his ability. And we're going to see how this plays out. Right? A certain American businessman, so again, this is Roland Hazard, had ability, good sense, and high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrists. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Jung. I believe it's Carl Gustav Jung, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, danger, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. I knew Howard would have this. Thank you, brother. 1926, guys, make a note in your book. I'm going to do that before we go on here. 1926.
I have the definition of psychiatrist that Ashton wanted to share, but they couldn't be here tonight. So the definition of psychiatrist is a medical doctor who specializes in diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of mental, emotional, behavioral disorders.
Go ahead, David.
Okay, so let me give you some dates too to go along with this, and and David brought up some stuff. So the certain American businessman, as David pointed out, is Roland Hazard, Hazard.
Which, by the way, great name for a terrible alcoholic. Hazard?
Absolutely. Yeah. The third, by the way, too. He's the third. One of the richest families in the country he was a part of. So he was born on October 29th, 1881, and his death was December 20th, 1945. None of that will keep you sober, but it'll be great coffee conversation someday.
History's fun. History's always
History is fun. Okay, then what David brought up is Carl Gustav Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist, psychoanalyst who founded analytical psychology. So he was born in Switzerland on July 26th, 1875. And he lived to the ripe old age where he died on June 6th, 1961, which was a couple months after I was born.
Let me just add this too. He found a particular way of thinking and analysis. He created a system of psychology called Jungian analysis. It is still in use today, guys. And I'm hammering this so everybody understands this wasn't just some schlocky quack that Roland went to see. This was still regarded one of the great psychiatric minds of all time. This is a very important doctor.
Absolutely. So middle of the paragraph there where David pointed out, he says, though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. Remember back in Bill's story on page 7, it says, surely this was the answer, self-knowledge, right? But look at how he came out of treatment with the doctor too. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of his inner workings of his mind and his hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. What I know about sobriety is not going to keep me sober. This is an action program. It's what I do around here. Man, I have met guys who know this book inside and out, and they can't put together 2, 3, 6 years, and they go back out again. Because this is not about what you know, it's about what you do. This is again an action program. You want to be a verb in Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous or DA, you do not want to be a noun. And nevertheless, he got drunk in a short time. Well, he got drunk in a short time after leaving the care of Carl Jung, and got on a train, went to France, stopped to get something to eat, and he was drunk in no time at all. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. Anyone else relate to that? I can't. Totally. Why? I just got done spending a year with this guy, or however long it was. I just spent all this time with the greatest psychoanalyst in the whole wide world. I know the inner workings of my mind. I know that this is impossible for me to pick up a drink again. But in a short period of time, I'm pounding in the bar. Another story in the book. All I did was go into the cafeteria to make a phone call. Bill's pounding on the bar. Roland is wondering, how did this happen again? No power, no choice, no control.
So how about this? Anybody here go to treatment? You don't have to raise your hand. I'm just asking the question because anybody here have this experience? Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. How about here's maybe the better question. Anybody here ever sponsor someone who just came out of treatment? Unusual confidence? Good Lord. It's like an epidemic. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Right? Those 28 days, come out feeling pretty on top of the world, start thinking, maybe I don't have that big of a problem. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll get this David guy to sponsor me. I'll work some of these steps, but feeling better. I'm looking better. Haven't drank, haven't drugged. Mama's letting me back in the house, letting me sleep in the bed. After all, he believed he'd acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Spent my 28 days in treatment, learned all about triggers and trigger warnings. I got this. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for the fall. I understood what was going on. I was feeling good. I was looking good. I was back in the job. I was back with my wife. The kids are looking at me like, oh, Daddy, we love you again. And all of a sudden I drank. And I can't account for it. Suddenly happened to me. No cure for suddenly. Not for the unrecovered mind. So he returned to Dr. Jung, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this?
Anything, Sam? Cool. All right, so we return back to the doctor. We go back to treatment. We go back to the doctor. We go back to where we need to go, whom he admired. Of course, he admired. He's one of the greatest psychoanalysts in the world. And asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. I will never, ever. If I think that there's some way possible for me to wake up the next morning with some kind of power in my life, then I'm not powerless. I'm not. I have to learn to concede to my innermost self that I'm a real alcoholic. He seemed quite rational, well-balanced with respect to other things. Yeah, he was one of the richest men in the whole world, and he was a great businessman, and all these wonderful things were happening in his life. Yet he had no control whatsoever of alcohol. Why was this? Hang on to this page. Let's go back to page 21, first paragraph, and there's a solution there where we talk about the real alcoholic. It says, but what about the real alcoholic? He may start out off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. Listen for it. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption, craving. Once he starts to drink, he breaks out in craving. The obsession, without my consent, without my permission, I pick up another drink. An obsession is a thought. If my sponsor would tell me, and when I first got sober, if I had a thought, I should pick up the phone and call him. But if I let that thought become an obsession, if I don't do something with that thought and get on my knees and ask God to, please don't allow me to pick up a drink, because this is beyond human aid. And then take the action, go on a Zoom meeting, get to a meeting, call my sponsor, whatever action I got to do, willing to go to any lengths, but I better be working these steps too, by the way. Then I don't have to pick up a drink. And that was my experience at 3 months sober. When all those meetings, I did all this work. I've already done all 12 steps, but the thought came into my mind at 3 months sober, I could pick up a drink. And no one would know. I got a 2-hour window, and I'm only going to have 2. I told myself the lie. The liar showed up. But then my sponsor had made me actually call him every single day at 6:30, every day for 90 days. I did it. I did it because, dude, I didn't want to drink again. And when I called him, I wasn't allowed to say everything's great. I had to tell him about my day because he thinks everything's great. I'm going to prison. I'm going to be divorced. I don't have a job. I'm going to be living in my car. Oh, everything's fine. That's what news people say, right? That everything is not fine. And I was telling myself all day long. So at 3 months sober, when I'm on a job site and it starts snowing and it becomes so heavy they cut us off and I got a 45-minute drive on a good day, the thought comes in my mind long before it became an obsession. I did something with that thought. I prayed, made a phone call. I talked to somebody for 45 minutes. I did not pick up a drink today. The obsession was gone at that day until the day now. Next week, if I don't screw this thing up, I'll have 24 years of continuous sobriety by the grace of God. That's a God-given sobriety day. But I did something against my nature, and my sponsor was doing something for me, at least for me. I'm not saying that I make my sponsees call me every day. I don't. But he's reconditioning my mind to ask you for help because I don't need to do this alone. And I didn't pick up a drink that day. Oh, my God, I was blown away. And there's a sign at the meeting that I used to go to, and I didn't really understand it. I know it's a simple sign, but I didn't get the silly signs like think, think, think. Well, they told me that wasn't for me. That was for them. But the one sign that I'm particularly talking about here is you're not alone anymore. And I felt that experience that day that I wasn't alone anymore. And I never, ever had to be alone ever again the rest of my life as long as I incorporated God and you into all my activities.
He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion. One of the most renowned psychiatrists on the planet said, I have a solution for you. Actually, I have two of them. This is the two initial solutions the doctor gave him. Put yourself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard. You are a danger to yourself and everyone about you. You're utterly hopeless, which means you're not going to get better. You're not going to regain your position in society. It means your career prospects are over. Coming from this wealthy family, you're not going to be able to go to all those galas and events and things. You have to become a shut-in, a recluse. Your life is over. Done.
Utterly hopeless. That's a great place to be, dude, if you're new. Oh, my goodness. I know that doesn't seem true, or that seems mean. But if I'm not utterly hopeless, that means I probably got one more idea, one more option here that I think I can utilize here to keep me sober. I don't have one. I'm done. I'm out of ideas. I'm done. I will try whatever you tell me to do. He says he begged the doctor for that answer, and he could never regain his position in society. He would have to be placed under lock and key, as David pointed out, or hire a bodyguard expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion. That's his opinion, because he couldn't do anything for him. Why? We just read about this on page 24. If you want to hang on to this page, let's go back. 24, fourth paragraph. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual's alcoholic tendencies, the obsession and the allergy, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid. I am beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. So I can either get sobered up, locked up, or covered up. That was my options here. These stark, ugly, here's the word underlined in my book, facts. Facts are known to be true, have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. This is the experience of others. But for the grace of God, there would have been 1,000 more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop, but can't not. I'm beyond human aid. I must find a power that's greater than myself, and it cannot be a human power. That's my truth.
One other thing, just to do a callback here too. He's utterly hopeless. And I think we get the sense that Roland knew he was, because it says he begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. He didn't say, well, doc, give me your theory about what's going on. He could not stop drinking. He thought he had it made. He begged the doctor, and the doctor gave him the whole truth. This is why we must not, guys, delivery is important, but we must tell new prospects the whole truth, the entire truth, holding back nothing. This is life or death. I'm sure we've asked this before. Guys, how many people in this meeting have lost somebody to alcoholism or drug addiction or to bulimia, any of these addictions? I bet almost all of us have. This thing kills. We need to be clear and open and honest. Now, does it mean that all of my communication to a newcomer is doom and gloom and we perseverate constantly on the problem? No. But I sure as hell got to make sure they understand that first step clearly. And it doesn't take a whole long time to do that either. David and I just spoke on an awesome CA Zoom yesterday. 40 minutes we powered through the first step. And that's the message. It doesn't take much longer than that. And then, okay, we understand the problem. Let's start talking about how we start to get better, which is moving right into step 2. But we must give all the information, the whole truth, and give it to the newcomer. Guys, we can't worry about people's feelings. It's one thing to insult someone. It's another to risk hurting their feelings by giving them a heavy dose of truth. All right? Got to get people to God. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude.
So this man still lives And he's a free man. What is he free of? He's free of the bondage of self. As we get farther along in the book, we're going to find out, and we're already finding this out, that there's two parts of the first step. The first part of the first step that I'm powerless over, I'm just going to use the word alcohol. I'm a cocaine addict too. I'm powerless over alcohol. That's a problem. That's not the problem. The dash says to continue. Now that I've learned to concede to my innermost self that I'm a real alcoholic, that I break out in craving, and once I stop, I cannot stay stopped. I get to find out what the real problem is, that my life is unmanageable. I am now firing myself from my management position. No longer am I running my life on my own free will. It doesn't work. It just, I've done a horrible job of running my life. All you got to do is look at my history here. And he says he does not need a bodyguard. I can go anywhere any other man can go. There is a caveat. I need to be spiritually fit to do that. I went to a wedding when I was 2 years sober, and I wasn't really spiritually fit. And I had to call somebody about 30 minutes into the wedding, and not that I was going to drink, but I was irritable, restless, and discontented, which means I'm going to drink. Maybe not then, but eventually. And the guy said, dude, you need to leave the wedding now. I couldn't have made that decision on my own. Again, God works through all the people in the fellowship and even outside this fellowship. But I've got to humble myself because I was at a hopeless condition of mind and body when I got here. Today, I incorporate other people in my life. Do I blab all my internal thoughts and actions in my life to everybody? No, of course not. I give spiritual consent. Spiritual consent means I give it to David, I give it to my sponsor, Judd, and I give it to one of my other sponsees. Spiritual consent for me is simple. It just means that I don't get to debate if you see something in me that I'm not doing properly, or I'm acting irrationally, or my ego's flaring up, whatever it is. I don't get to debate it. I just get to consider what you're saying to me. I need to have people in my life that do that, to tell me the truth about myself, because my ego shows up two ways. First of all, it tells me I'm the best guy at this meeting tonight. And then sometimes it tells me I'm the worst piece of poop at this meeting tonight. I never know. It wants me dead. And it's part of the unmanageability in my life today. So you can go anywhere, any free man can go. This certain simple attitude. This is what I've been looking for my entire life. Some certain simple attitude that involves having a power greater than myself. Well, in other words, the last thing I'll say about this is that I have access to this power as long as I get free of self.
Certain simple attitude. How about I ain't God? That's a pretty solid, simple, certain attitude that's going to carry me through this thing, which, by the way, was a very difficult position for me to get to. Not that I thought I was God, but I thought we're kind of like peers. We kind of, cooperatively work together to run the world. And once I start to realize the sort of ridiculousness of that, I was able to start to identify with the power greater than myself. It was amazing how I started to get healthy. So let's just sort of wrap the context again where we are, right? Roland terrible alcoholic, couldn't stop drinking, went into the care of Dr. Jung, one of the most brilliant and accredited psychiatrists on the planet, worked with him, got better, was so full of self-knowledge, felt good, looked good. He's like, I got this. Split, got on a train, got off the train, started drinking, went back to the doctor, said, doctor, please give me the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And the doctor said, you got two alternatives. One is lock yourself up or hire a bodyguard. That's it. That's what this brilliant psychiatrist had for him to say. Let's pick up the reading in the top of 27. Some of our alcoholic readers may think that they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend has had with this doctor. Now, it's a bit of a non sequitur there, because we had started to introduce spirituality, and then we sort of moved sideways a little bit into the story to rouse us to this point. And really, this is, all right, bottom paragraph 25, my favorite paragraph. Page 27, my favorite page. Why? Because in very simple language that's easy to read and understand, Dr. Jung explains to Roland exactly what it means to have a spiritual experience, spiritual awakening. He doesn't tell him how he can achieve it, but he's going to explain, if you can get this, here's how your life is going to be forever changed.
Can I just add one little thing to that paragraph? And I think it's important to me. This book meets me right where I'm at. Right here in this paragraph, it says, some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. It's meet me right where I'm at. And to David's point, now the doctor's going to go on and tell Roland he's going to need a vital spiritual experience. That's the only thing he has to offer him. So this is where the book meets me. It's unbelievable how he writes this book.
If no one's told you this before, the entire point of 12-step recovery is to get spiritual help and to have a spiritual experience. Right? Whatever comes before the dash in the first step in whatever fellowship you're in, powerlessness over alcohol, powerlessness over cocaine, other mind-altering substances, powerlessness over gambling or sex, or food, whatever it is, that qualifies me for membership in a fellowship. After the dash, that my life is unmanageable and spiritually ill, that qualifies me for the solution. Right? We come together in a fellowship because we have this shared experience. But we talked about this earlier, right? Back on, what is it, page 17, David? Our common peril doesn't bind us together. How many times do we sit in the bars with the same people, with other alcoholics for hours, right? Or up at the spot, right? Or all weekend, getting annihilated. We didn't wake up in the morning and say, hey, let's go find a spiritual solution together, right? We can't be bound just in the problem. It's a part of the cement. The real binding comes out of our common solution and how we trudge this road together. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. Guys, I just made a follow-up appointment with my endocrinologist today. I have type 2 diabetes. What if I went to my endocrinologist and she said, you have the insulin resistance of a chronic diabetic. I have never seen one single case of diabetes recover where that state of insulin resistance existed to the extent that it does in you. How would I feel? What if, God forbid, you got cancer? And everybody here, we're all over the world, so I'm just going to say Chicago because this is the biggest city near me. What if, God forbid, you had cancer and you went to the best hospital in downtown Chicago, like Northwestern or Rush, and you met with the chief of oncology, and they looked at you and your test results, and the chief of oncology at one of the best hospitals in the world said, hey, I've never seen anybody with cancer like yours get better. Death sentence with the oncologist. Death sentence with the endocrinologist. Death sentence from the sponsor, the step guide, helping somebody understand the severity, the life or death situation around their powerlessness. Right? We die as chronic alcoholics. We die as chronic drug addicts. This is the most brilliant psychiatrist on the planet said to Roland, you are going to die. Imagine being told this.
I have the definition of chronic, which is described as always present, constantly vexing, weakening, or troubling. So in the sentence, you have the mind of that doesn't really make sense in the sentence, never mind. But an alcoholic where the alcohol or the illness is always present, constantly vexing, weakening, or troubling you.
When Ashton is back next week, we'll have Ash talk about chronic illness versus, there's a good medical definition, if you don't mind reminding her that for next week.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so this is a reoccurring thing, and the doctor's, what he's addressing here is of the mind. He's telling them about the obsession of the mind here. He's addressing it perfectly. And he's never seen one single case recover. Never. In all his experience there, where this state of mind exists to the extent that he doesn't you. That does not make Roland unique, by the way. As a matter of fact, I relate to this 100%. This is me when I'm looking at almost 24 years of sobriety. I look back at this like, this is the mind that I had. Oh, my God. You think I wanted to ruin all those dates, lose all those jobs, give away all that money, give away the careers that I had? Oh, my God. Ruin my the marriages that I had? I didn't want to do. But I had no power, no choice, no control. No different No different than Roland here. He's not unique. Our friend fell through the gates of hell. This is a feeling of what? Hopelessness. This is what I'm you don't know you're striving for this when you're new, but this is what you better be striving for. Absolutely hopelessness. Because where there's hopelessness, there's hope. And hope was described to me very early on in my sobriety, and I still hold it close to my heart, is a vision beyond my present circumstances. And they were bleak as all hell. The gates of hell had claimed on me. Because the fact of the matter is, I do this just like David pointed out. I got a guy I'm working with. He's here tonight. I took him through the first two steps. We're going to do the third step on our knees. We're going to talk about it, getting our knees on Friday. But before I left the other day when I left his house, I also gave him a vision for what his life can look like. Through my experience, I don't just leave with just a problem. I got to give him a vision for what his life looks like, because my life looks amazing to me today. I pinch myself every day that God has done for me what I could not do for myself. I am responsible for this work and all the things that happen. But I have a personal relationship with my Creator. I can call him his power anytime I want. The gates of hell are not going to clang shut on me any longer today.
The doctor said you're going to be, like David said, was it locked up, covered up, and what's the other up?
Sobered up.
Sobered
the
up,
best one.
right? He didn't even tell him sobered up was an option.
No.
He said locked up, covered up, or a bodyguard. All right. I guess that would be pretty rare these days. So he said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is." Now remember, this is pre-12-step recovery. Very important to what he's going to say here. "Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while." Again, this is pre-AA, pre-CA, pre-all the A's. He's saying here and there, once in a while, because he only saw it, very rarely. Today, we see it all the time. When somebody new comes in and they're hopeless and they're desperate and they're powerless, and they do all the work thoroughly and honestly, we see people get right quickly. But at this time, he said here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. And Sam Sam, should I stop here? Do you have vital or spiritual or any of that? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have the definition for vital,
Go ahead.
which is described as essential or life-supporting, life-sustaining, life-giving. So here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called life-supporting, essential spiritual experiences.
So life-giving, life-sustaining, spiritual, bigger than human, right? Of the ether, of the universe, an experience is like an event. So a life-sustaining, larger than human event. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had these. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. And I'm not saying if you got that, I know we've done it before, but rare and hard to explain. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. This brilliant psychiatrist, guys, is saying the only thing I've ever seen that works for an alcoholic, and I know I'm not in our normal flow here. I can't help myself when I start reading this paragraph. Forgive me, David. So this brilliant psychiatrist is saying the only thing that I've ever seen work for an alcoholic is to have this vital spiritual experience. But it's phenomena. It's very rare. It's unpredictable. I can't quite explain it. I can't give it to you. What they look like, they appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. This is what it looks like, guys, coming up here. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. This is the fruits of the spiritual experience, of the spiritual awakening. When I have my spiritual awakening as the singular result of working these steps, my ideas, what lives in my head, emotions, those things that dwell in my heart, and attitudes, those things that are rotting in my gut, ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were what's the guiding force of the lives of these men, my thoughts and feelings and attitudes that were propelling me, pushing me through life like a runaway train. Let's not get hung up on suddenly. Next week, we'll read the Spiritual Experience, Appendix 2, and we'll see most of us don't suddenly have this. Most of us have it gradually. So I'm just going to say ideas, emotions, and attitudes were once the guiding force of the lives of these men are cast to one side. And a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. Guys, in my almost 20 years of continuous recovery, and I know David would say the same thing in his almost 24 years, and other people here could concur, I have never seen one person fail to have a vital spiritual experience when they did all of the work thoroughly and honestly. I have never seen anyone's thoughts, feelings, and attitudes get cast aside and replaced by similar or worse ones. The God of my understanding just doesn't work that way. I think, feel, and believe and react better. Now, can I lose my spiritual fitness? You bet your ass. And this is talked about in 10 and 11. This is why we have these daily disciplines. But if I get right with God and I stay right with God, my thinking, my feeling, and my reacting is fixed. I'll pause there. I'll let you jump in, David, and then we'll finish the paragraph.
Okay, so right after Carl Jung talks about this vital spiritual experience, as Silkworth called it, an entire psychic change, they mean the exact same thing. Two different doctors, two different parts of the world. To me, these occurrences are a phenomenon. So this doctor, one of the greatest psychoanalysts in the world, has observed these things before, but he cannot explain what they are exactly. And he's had a relationship with William James, so he knows a little bit about this, and this is probably where he gets these ideas from. So these huge emotional displacements, rearrangements, change. We're talking about my ideas. Ideas are my thinking. And these are radical changes too, by the way. They must be radical. My emotions are my feelings, as David pointed out, and my attitudes are my beliefs. And by the way, this must happen for me to recover. And no human power can produce this. No meetings, no sponsor. This happens by a power greater than myself. He just said it's a vital spiritual experience. This is the point of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get to a power greater than ourselves. Can it solve our problems here? And what we're talking about here, that when all these things happen in my life, when my feelings change, when my thinking changes, then my feelings change. And then without this work, that I'm trapped in my emotional nature. I was always trapped in my emotional nature my entire life. Sadness is just a God-given feeling today. It doesn't own me. It's okay to be sad now and then. It doesn't drive me around any longer. And then the next says there, these lives of these men are suddenly cast one aside. Again, suddenly. This is something that I correlate this exactly to a power greater than myself that does this for me. And a completely new set of the conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. This is all about the change that takes place as a result of these steps, for me anyways. In fact, I've been trying to produce this emotional arrangement within you. The doctor can't do this. The doctor can't provide it. He's trying to be honest with him here. Go ahead, David.
If you don't have a strong rap for explaining the first step to a newcomer, please work on that. It's almost like you got to be Bill Wilson with his approach to sales. We must help people understand the medical estimate, the physical and the mental power sense for sure, but they got to understand this unmanageability, this spiritual malady, right? That after the dash, take them to the bedevilments on page 52 to illustrate that. And when inevitably they say, yes, all 7 or 8, however many bedevilments there are, yeah, I feel like that, say, how would you like to feel differently? How would you like to think differently? How'd you like to react differently? And then bring them to 27 here and say, if you do this work thoroughly and honestly, you're going to have the spiritual awakening, and your thoughts and emotions and attitudes are going to be better. You're going to be reborn a new person. And it can happen pretty quickly. Right? Make sure they understand this. Shouldn't say the first sit down, within the second sit down, right? If we go by the book, first sit down, build a rapport. second sit down, smack him in the side of the head with the soft cover big book. What does the doctor go on to say? He says, in fact, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed were successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. And there's a little asterisk says for amplification, see Appendix 2, and it was back on 25 that Appendix 2 is brought up for the first time. And again, we'll plan to get to it next week. We'll see how we're doing. Maybe we'll start with that. But at any rate, anybody here want to venture a guess at maybe how it was that Carl Jung was able to help other, what does he say here? Many individuals with the methods which I employed were successful. So, hey, other alcoholics, other addicts, I was able to help. But nobody like you. Why was Dr. Jung able to help? Well, I don't think it's documented, but here's my speculation. They weren't real alcoholics, right? And the expression real alcoholic is not puffery. It's not a point of pride. It's a definition here in the book that's used repeatedly. The real alcoholic is powerless physically and mentally, and they have an unmanageable life, otherwise known as being spiritually ill. So maybe Dr. Jung was able to help those certain type of hard drinker. The drinking looks like us, right? Some of the symptoms look like us, some of the side effects, some of the consequences. But remember, what differentiates the real alcoholic from the hard drinker is that love can't get us to quit. Getting fired from our job can't get us to quit. Right? Having the kids taken away can't get us to quit. Getting thrown in jail can't get us to quit. Nothing can get us to quit except God. Hard drinker, if the circumstances get bad enough, and it might be difficult, may have to detox, he can still quit if he's got the right stimulation, motivation, or catalyst. Sam?
Yeah, so go ahead, Sam, please. I'm sorry.
I did have the definition for phenomena and then displacements. So the definition I have for phenomena is unusual, unaccountable, or extraordinary events. And just like David said, a rare event. And then displacements is being changed or replaced. So in the sentences, to me, these occurrences are unusual, unaccountable, extraordinary events. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional changes and rearrangements.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, so the doctor is even telling him here he's worked with other people before, but I've never been successful. Well, prior to that, I'm sorry. With many individuals, this method which I employ are successful. To David's point, maybe they're hard drinkers or moderate drinkers. But what the doctor means by being employed is he was engaged with them in talking about the psychoanalyst psychology that he performs with them. But he had never been successful with an alcoholic of his description. Again, Roland is not unique here. Of my description, I'm the same kind of a drinker and drug addict as Roland is here. Once I started, I couldn't control the amount I drink, and once I stopped, I couldn't stay stopped. And my life was absolutely unmanageable. Everything on page 52 was true for me when I came in. And it's not like that any longer. Why? Because I've had a vital spiritual experience as a direct result, the 12 step tells me that, of these steps. Again, I bring it up every week, but I got to live in the disciplines of 10 and 11 and 12. Why? Because it tells me this happens, all these things on this page, they happen to me automatically. I didn't do it. I didn't create it. This is a beautiful thing, guys.
I think this is a perfect place to stop right there looking at the clock, 7:59.